Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast, the show dedicated to celebrating female entrepreneurs' strength, resilience, and innovation. Be inspired by stories of women and what they cherish to help them conquer against all odds. Every other week, you will learn from remarkable women on how they navigate challenges, uphold their values, and create sustainable success. And now, here's your host, Jim Rimbach.
Hello and welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast. Today we're going to talk about, really a lot of different aspects of business. We'll even get into some lending discussions, things that are important for people, whether or not they're in the startup phase or they're in the growth phase. Because I have Amanda Barron-Frank on the show with me today. Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great. It's great to have you here. Now, before we get into the discussions and even talking about being a wife with a husband and being in business together, which in itself has some interesting challenges and discussions because you can never separate, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. If you could, though, just share with the listeners and watchers how you're actually making a difference with the lives of the people that you work with today.
Yeah. So, as lawyers, that is obviously our job. And sometimes when people are in their profession for years, it becomes mundane, and you sort of lose sight of the reasons why you went into a certain profession or did a certain thing. So, for my husband and I, Tommy, that is always very true to our moral compass. We really do look at how we can help. More than obviously you need money to live, right? You're in business for money, but that to us is always number one in how we can help, even if it is talking ourselves out of business. It just, we feel like we've been afforded the information and the understanding and the education to help others, and so that is the primary focus, and we do every day, regardless of the subject matter, regardless of the client.
Okay, so most often people get a reputation with certain types of business that they're doing. So when you speak of that integrity, to me, that's what you,
Sure.
I was hearing and what you were saying,
Yeah.
is you start getting a certain following of client, a certain type of work that you do on a consistent basis because people talk to one another.
Yes.
Right. It's those recommendations where people say, oh, you got that issue? You need to talk to Amanda and Tommy, right? So where do you find yourself spending most of your time?
Yeah. I mean, that is where our primary source of new clients come from, is word of mouth and referrals. And we are so proud of that because in 2 weeks, our firm will be 6 years old. And we started it so young, on a dream, like didn't even know if it was going to pan out. And our reputation comes back to us really on a daily basis. I've heard great things about you. I want to work with you, please. For me, I've spent my time building in the residential and commercial real estate world. For my husband, Tommy, it's more of the bankruptcy, foreclosure, and litigation world. So and there is no greater compliment and no better feeling than when you get that client that says, I was referred by so and so because you did such a great job and you really helped and you were kind, and all of those attributes that are in part of what you said, integrity, that carry your reputation without you having to say it.
Okay, I'm glad you shared that, because for me, as I start thinking about being an entrepreneur, is that oftentimes those two things coming together. So when you start talking about business, when you start talking about whether or not it's the financial bankruptcy element, or could be overall litigation, liability, all of those types of things, we have to protect ourselves for that. And
Sure.
if we're not careful, we could have a scenario where something happens in our business life and business world and with our business, and then therefore they go after our personal property.
That's correct.
So if you could share a little bit about how do I properly protect myself, going into business, and what should I consider in regards to, that startup, as well as what I often find too, is that people may take the proper steps. They have, the the insurance to cover them for liability, but then they have this growth thing that starts happening, and they get to a certain point, but yet they didn't change their coverage. So if you could kind of roll that into, I gave you a little bit of a
Sure.
maturation process to kind of help people understand.
Yeah, and I think you make a good example of the insurance, but it's just even on a wider example, just life in general, right? You start making money, you start spending more, your overhead might be more or might not be if you're smart. Um, you enjoy toys, maybe more, cars, boats, what have you, and it starts getting bigger and bigger. And the successes that you are having in business perhaps don't feel as large because of that branching out. So with your question, my suggestion would really to always, always, always keep your pulse on everything, right? So don't overextend yourself. You know, if you're making and you're doing well and you want to treat yourself, fine, but never live above your means and never overextend yourself because you have to take into account for a rainy day. A lot of our clients whom are in bankruptcy, and bankruptcy does not have that connotation that it used to, right? Like this world is really hard to live in these days. The cost of everything is astronomical and life happens, right? A bad business decision, COVID, right? Your business is thriving, and then this thing comes and swoops out from underneath you and your business, your livelihood, and all of your sustainability. A sickness, that's a lot of eh, you can't really account for that, medical bills or things like that. So these are obviously things you can't necessarily plan for, but can, right? By not overextending yourself and leaving something at least there just to cushion you to get to a certain point where you can maybe coast. But that would be my biggest advice, right? It's just not to just make $5 and spend six or five.
Well, easy, as they say, easier said than done, right? Uh,
Sure, sure.
when we're talking about an entrepreneur, especially if you could go back into that, maturation process that I was referring to,
Mhm.
is a lot of times from a startup perspective, I am going in the hole, right? I am essentially day to day already being beyond my means because
Exactly right.
I have to fund this thing to go. And so you've
Right.
had some experience with SBA loans and things like that. And, you
Yeah.
know, if they're important from a couple different perspectives. One being is that if I only looked at it as, well, I absolutely cannot live beyond my means, and I have to look specifically at my income, you may never start that business. You may constrain that business. And that's where funding comes into play. And there's been so many different types of funding sources for female entrepreneurs, and some of them even in the grant space. So if you could help us kind of understand how I can essentially fuel and fund my business,
Yeah.
and then do a better job of separating that personal and professional, financial, types of operation.
Myrina.ai draws inspiration from the legendary Amazonian Queen Marina, embodying resilience and strategic brilliance. With our AI-powered SaaS platform, we equip women-led businesses for success in the evolving landscape of AI and business automation. As a partner and community for female-led businesses, Myrina.ai maximizes their potential using AI while providing essential support. Ready to amplify your success using AI with like-minded ladies? Register or learn more at myrina.ai. And now, back to our interview.
Yeah, so you bring up SBA lending, and it's a great tool because it is it's backed by the SBA, the Small Business Act, which would be a loan, right? You ask for this loan, and there's categories of it, right? It could be for working capital, it could be for real estate, it could be whatever. But you basically do have to put together a plan to let the SBA know what you're using that money for. Payroll, like I said, real estate, working capital, whatever it would take to start up your business, which is an amazing tool to have. But if you're talking, and I think your question goes towards like the budgeting of it more so than anything, then it would really be to, when you put together that plan of to the SBA of what you're spending the money on, be true to that, right? Or even go below that. Because we all know the story of you're planning on spending X and you wind up spending Y, and then you are in fact in that hole. But if you are afforded that loan, right, that could help you ride the wave of starting a business. And nothing is guaranteed, right? It could fail or it could succeed. But by doing things smaller in the front end, it'll ultimately help you. I'll give you the best example is we have a client who started a business, and rather than having an inventory of 100 items, which is what they intended, they had 500 items, right? And each item costs a lot of money to inventory. This is an example of getting ahead of yourself, which is very easy to do. I'm not here to judge at all. But it's just really keeping a pulse and understanding that the smaller you go, the bigger you can scale. But starting big and getting ahead of yourself could really hurt you on the end.
Well, yeah, and that gets into a whole different discussion and discipline and in regards to how do I properly assess the market opportunities and
Right. And that's, and I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer. Unfortunately, that's like a byproduct of being a lawyer, right? Like you're here to say a great business venture, awesome situation, but keep in mind X, Y, and Z could happen. And I've seen it happen 9,000 times. And this is what you're hiring me for. So that, that's really why it's really great to have good people behind you, lawyers, accountants, advisors, whatever you have, because these people are there. You're looking at this from, oh my God, I get to be my own boss. I get to do things my own way. I get to have my own hours. I get to do all these things. You're losing sight of, okay, well, what about if you can't make your rent? And what about if you can't, make your payroll? And what if, your kids call out school sick? Who's going to take care of the bit? All of these things that you have advisors to chime in and be like, okay, I need to have a game plan for that. And then you're more successful going through.
Okay, so now you open up the door to help us kind of understand the dynamics of being a wife in a business, right? You mentioned all of these different disciplines that I have to have a pulse on. I have to be able to either, protect or insure or, be provided for. I mean, all of these types of different things. So how do you and Tommy actually look at all the things that you have to do from your legal practice perspective and your home?
It's, a lot of people tried talking us out of going into business together. And quite frankly, we could not imagine being in business with anybody else. We trust each other. We love each other. Are things hard sometimes? Sure. I have a 4 and a 2-year-old who and run a business. Like, who's going to say our life is like easy right now, but we're very, very blessed. And we don't do things from the heart. We do things with our head. We really carefully plan things out, and we really do things together. So nobody makes a decision without the other being on board and both of us mustering through. And we tag team, so like I do pickups, from school, and I'm really like more hands-on there. My husband is too. Every night he's there for bath time and story time and all of those things. But my job with real estate is a little bit more fluid. I'm not beholden to a judge's schedule, whereas Tommy is beholden to a judge's schedule, right? And so it is that balance that we have with each other that gets us through I like to call my days Jenga pieces. Like I just constantly put, one piece into the other. But that's what gets us through. And as long as the other, it sounds so cliche, but as long as the other respects one another and doesn't lose sight of what the other person is doing for the marriage and the business and the children, all of that, then you really could get through anything. It's that like resentment that builds up where one feels like they're doing more than the other. Then I think that that dynamic could really hurt.
Okay, so I have to ask, when you start talking about, dual responsibilities and also putting in the perspective of lawyers, how lawyers operate, and how do you prevent yourself from being able to turn over, control to your partner
Yeah.
without the obsessive fear of losing control and then feeling you have to helicopter or constantly monitor?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, a good one. And our dynamic is certainly that. My husband is more like, I'll get to it, laissez-faire, and I'm like very type A, like I want it done now, So I think we understand and know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And rather than play a blame game or like, lean into it as like a wrongdoing, we just handle it. So like I hate dealing with our accountant. He gives me hives. I just don't like dealing in that scenario. So my husband does all of that, right? Um, our marketing team, I'll handle all that, right? So it's just a balance of what our strengths and our weaknesses are, that really ultimately gets the job done all around.
Okay, but I have to say, and stop and think about this because I know I've been there many times after being married over 30 years to a CPA. Is
Congratulations.
Thank you. The day is long. A lot of things. You're mentally fatigued, and so then he is too, and then the lawyer gets whipped out, right? So it's like, how do you guys handle that to make sure that it doesn't get into the point of resentment and
Yeah.
irritation? And because I know for me, um, talking about those different personalities is my wife will just spit it out and she's over with it. Me, I'll spit it out and I linger with it. Right. So
Right.
it's like, she's like, what are you talking about? I thought we were over that. And I'm like, I wasn't.
Yeah. I'm more like you. Um, no, listen, I think anybody who's been married or is married, knows that you go through cycles, right? Like that roommate phase, that, lovey phase, that I can't stand you phase. You go through them all. And I think it's just important to recognize that it is a byproduct of a phase, right? Like what you're going through in life. And we both recognize that when we both feel like we're, just like playing defense and just handling the kids and handling the work and whatever, like we'll make sure we pick a new show and every night, let's say like 8 o'clock, we'll both watch that show together and, have that. So I think it's just important. We try to make sure that we go out without the kids for dinner at least once a week. Just very, very small things, but, just allow you to claim your marriage and your partnership before anything else.
No, that's good, helpful advice and a good reminder. And even if I was a solo person with a solo home and kids, so a single parent, I mean, some of those things still have to take place, whether it's,
Sure.
me taking my own time and going to the movie, by myself or with a friend, I mean,
Even more so.
yeah,
It's so commendable to do it on
yeah.
your own.
Okay. So what inspired you to start your own business and how does it align with the concept of cherish and conquer?
So, we started our business really, Tommy started first. And it was an opportunity that came about, and he was, working for a firm, and he's like, I can do this. But dynamic wise, this is where it really helps because in the beginning, he just wasn't sure. And in my mind, I'm like, but why not? Like you're brilliant, you're smart, we can do this together, and it was that like togetherness that created the firm. And then I worked while he was building it. and then it got to a point where we needed to either hire or I was to come on. And so I left my SBA job as in-house counsel for an SBA lender and went work for the firm. And that was 6 years ago. How that relates to cherishing and conquering, um, I think since the basis of this show is breaking barriers and entrepreneurship and things, I think it's best said that sometimes when you're working for someone else or you're in this like mundane job where you can't really expand your creativity because you have a job description and you're there to do that, it sort of makes you not be able to cherish what you set out to do. And I think that being a business owner affords you that opportunity to cherish what you're doing. Sure, the everyday minutia of it is obnoxious and gets repetitive. But if I don't like doing what I'm doing today, then I have the ability to do a different type of law or do something else and branch out to cherish what I set out to law school to do. So I think that would be my definition, right? Cherishing what you have by the con- the consistent love for what you do, right? Like, don't get bored with it. Don't just sit with it, but keep building upon it. And some people are okay with that, right? I am not. I am someone who's always looking for more, building, learning. That's just my thing. I loved law school for that reason because every day you walked into class and you're like, oh my God, I'm learning more. I'm like this wealth of knowledge today where I wasn't yesterday. It's amazing. And then obviously conquering what you set out to do. So do it the very best way. If I wanted to change the law, which I did, I started my career as a prosecutor and now I'm doing residential and commercial real estate. So it's just being the best you can be, but always have that moral compass of integrity. To me, that will guide you through everything because your reputation will always precede yourself, whether you're the best at what you do or just okay at what you do. That's what my definition would be.
At the core of Myrina.ai is customization and the innovative AI you process, which uses AI to infuse your personality, style, and vision into cloning you and growing your business. Are you ready to amplify your success using AI with a community of fellow female entrepreneurs? Go to Myrina.ai today. And now, back to the interview.
Okay, and I thank you for sharing that because I don't like framing that question, and I'd like to hear what people's perspectives are, and even your response, to that is so uniquely you, from even what we have been talking about for the past few minutes, but and also very very detailed. So I thank you for that.
Sure,
Now,
thank you.
one of the things that to me I think I struggle with, and my assumption is a lot of other people do, is, you do make that leap and you think there is something that you do cherish. And then you get there and you're like, well, this really isn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that there were some things that you presumed. And then as you're going down this journey with Tommy and growing your business and your family, is that, I thought that was important, or I thought I would cherish that and that would actually fuel my motivations, but not so much. Is there something that you came across that kind of falls into that realm?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, just happened last night. So I started my career as a prosecutor, and my one regret is that I didn't explore other areas of law in law school. I just knew I wanted to be a prosecutor and did every type of internship to surround it, albeit police departments and prosecutors' offices and judges. And they were great experience, don't get me wrong, but they were one trick ponies, right? Criminal law. And now here I am practicing. I did in-house counsel work, and then I was in SBA, and then I ultimately have been now doing residential commercial real estate for the last 8-ish years. And last night, my husband and I were watching a new show. It's on Apple Plus. with Jake Gyllenhaal. The name escapes me right now, but anyway, he's a prosecutor. I mean, turn of events, he's a suspect in one of the murders that he was prosecuting. But I was watching the intensity of that profession and just how they could not leave their cases and just all of it. And I turned to Tommy and I said, like, I'm so grateful to not do that anymore, because I am not somebody that could walk away from it. I wouldn't be able to balance motherhood and that, because it would consume me. And I know it's just my personality. I know my personality, right? Some people are not like that, but it's just me. And so I looked at it and it gave me such anxiety, because I'm like picturing myself now as a mother, as a business owner, life. When you're young, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of law school, you don't own a house, you don't this, you don't that, like all of these responsibilities, all these anxieties are off. It's just like you have to perform and you have to, be a good lawyer, and you have to all of those standard things. But now with life, I couldn't imagine the mental load that it would have. And that's what I set my career up to be. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and it's definitely very fresh.
Yes, yes.
So I would dare to say, finding a place to put your passion is something that is continuing to evolve. So, what are some of the key things that you've learned, and how there's a moment when passion for your business actually fueled your perseverance through tough times?
Passion for the business that fueled my perseverance through tough times. I think it's very easy to get to a point in your life where you just want security. That's all I think any human really ever wants. So there are times where I'm just like, it's so much easier being a W-2 employee, like get my paycheck, work, and like not have to worry about a reputation of a business, the growth of a business, payroll, rent, whatever. And then you really look back at what you've created, right? Like it's almost like looking at one of your children and you're like, started from like nothing. And I've grown this thing into, yes, it provides for your family, but like the reputation, the integrity, that to me is what gets you through. And is that perseverance, right? When your reputation precedes you. And so it's like, just keep trucking along and keep that going.
Can you provide an example of when sticking to your principles actually led to a significant achievement or breakthrough in your business?
Yeah, I think I think that the best example I can give is in the real estate world specifically, there are traditions that people do. They're not law, but I would say traditions of the trade. And I'm very much a rule follower and very much by the book in things that I do. And so some realtors don't like that, right? They like somebody who is flexible or easygoing, in the sense where they're willing to muddy the waters wherever it could be. And I am not. I have a reputation where I have my compass and that's it. And if you want to come on board with me, I'm not a mill. I work hard for the people that I work with, but this is the way it's going to go. And these are the reasons, not just because I'm who I am and because I say, but these are the reasons. And once I explain to you the reasons, which I have no problem doing, you'll understand why. And so that may have lost me business, but it also has gained me business in the sense where this is Amanda. Like, this is what you get. And you want somebody behind, because when people love people who play in the gray or do whatever, but when shit hits the fan and, everybody is trying to scurry away from the bad, then you're not so happy you went with that person. So for me, I teach ethics to attorneys. I am very, very, very much by the books. Whether it costs me business, no problem, because I could sleep at night. So that's really the compass.
I got a good chuckle out about what you were saying. So here's a good story for you. Recently, we actually had a pontoon boat that we sold.
Okay.
And somebody who was interested in buying the boat says, "Hey, we want it, but can you only do the bill of sale for $10,000?" Because they didn't want to pay the taxes, right?
Of course, great example. That's exactly where my head was going.
That's right. And I said, that ain't going to happen. My wife is a CPA, and she's not going to put her licensure in jeopardy. Not going to happen. Guess
Good
what?
for you.
That person went away.
Bye.
Not going to do that.
Yeah, I commend you. Hearing stories like that just makes me want to work more with someone like you, because you're working with someone with integrity.
I appreciate that. So it's, and so part of that can also go to an extreme, but you have to, and what I mean by that is, like, for example, when my wife and I first got married, we sat down with a financial planner, and he made us take a risk assessment. And it took us about, I don't know, about 5 or 10 minutes to complete. It wasn't very long, but he went away, and he came back, and he goes, "Okay," he goes, "I went ahead and graded your risk assessment." And he looked at my wife and he said, "You're actually more risky than he is." And she was like, "There's no way. No way." Because her perception is I work in the gray, right?
Right.
That's right. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "And let me tell you why." He goes, "Because when an opportunity comes your way," he goes, "you don't explore it. You will shut it off. And so you have to have that fine balance of risk and reward." So if you think about it from that perspective, how do you guard against being, too conservative,
Yeah.
and missing out on opportunity? Because there is a
Yeah.
balance.
Sure. It's a great question. I think the only thing that really, if you're asking me personally, I think the thing that guides me is, by law, am I allowed to do it? If the answer is no, then that's a hell no. If the law allows me to do it, will I sleep at night doing it? And then that'll be the determinant. So that's like what the logic of my question is. Whether it is too stringent, maybe, but it's gotten me to where I am, and honestly, I could get a good night's sleep. So it is what it is.
Well, I think that's important, because if you don't have that type of logic, and a lot of us can refer to, at least for me, it can refer to Star Trek and Spock thinking, right? Take out the
Yep.
motion. And again, there's
Yeah.
cons to that too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if I don't have the logic behind, some of my decisions, then it makes it a little bit more difficult to know what how to head in the right direction, how to continue to move forward. And I end up spinning around in a lot of things. So I think the process is important. So I actually just recently made a change on something, and somebody asked me why I did that. I said, well, if you know me well, there's probably a list of 30 different things that were pro and con based. Because if I don't do that, then the emotion and the excitement of opportunity and things like that will take over, and
Right.
I will make a wrong step. So I have
But that just goes to show how informed you are, because most people won't even get to that point. They'll just let the happiness or the excitement take over. So it just goes to show you how informed you are.
Well, experience and pain. That's
That really is it. And going back to your first question about entrepreneurship and like how to do that assessment of like whether to get too big for your britches or not, like that, it is ultimately growing pains, whether it's the type of practice of law or it's running your own business. Like there's only so much you can learn in everything. Everything else is trial and error, and that's the biggest lesson in anything.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to throw this one past you because I use it as a reference all the time. Is
Sure.
that if you talk about leading and leadership and leading a business, leading your family, all of those types of things, uh, when I refer to leading and leadership, I talk about practicing leadership, right? And the example I give is that I said, "Do you think physicians are their own physician?" No, they're not. They're smarter than that. Do you think lawyers are their own lawyers? Typically not. They have their own counsel. And what do? They are practicing medicine. They're practicing law. So you need to
Spot on.
continue to practice leadership.
Spot on.
So give me your perspectives on that.
It's 100. When we bought our house, we had an attorney represent us because the attorney who is their own attorney is an idiot. So 100%, I practice what you just preached, and agree with you 100%. Um, and I know a lot. My OB, when I had my kids, I was like, were you your wife's OB? And he's like, no. He was like, I was outside pacing. Are you kidding me? As if I never did it before. So I think the lesson here in that question is that people need to understand that they are not the master of anything, and that they are here to just keep learning and learn from other people's experiences and other people's failures and successes. I read a lot of biographies for that reason, because I like knowing how people succeeded, how they failed, what lessons they have after or before they've done that. That is me. And I believe I've learned from family members and people in my life who didn't necessarily believe that anything they've ever done was wrong, and maybe they've gotten successful regardless. But I am of the thought process that if someone else has done it, I can only learn from it, both the good and the bad. And I think for those entrepreneurs, they need to understand that joining networking groups, joining friends who are doing it, joining other women who are moms and business owners, or just even employees, anything. You need some type of camaraderie to know how someone else is doing it, or else you're just sitting with yourself thinking you're doing it right. And you could either be expanding your horizons, doing it better, or doing it just the same. Maybe you just get a pat on the back and you're like, you're doing it great. So that really, like, people need to just not be vain and think that they're doing it right, and reach out and understand how others are doing it. That would be my biggest advice.
Or, to add on to that is to not operate with innocent unknowing.
Right.
And that's all it is. And
Right.
in a dictionary, that's called, ignorance. But
Right.
unfortunately, we vilify it.
Right.
But we don't know everything. And so that was very, very helpful. So, and that kind of opens up the door for me to ask the question is, can you share a story that, when you've had to pivot or adapt your business strategy, because of, some of the things that you've learned in that particular process of, innovation and creative thinking?
Yeah, I think it's really my transition from criminal to real estate. I started doing criminal at our firm, and I just realized that it was not for me. Um, and it was actually very fortuitous that it happened that way, because then I got pregnant with our daughter, and then COVID hit, and I didn't want to have to go to court, with a brand new baby, and being pregnant, and in this crazy world at that time. So that was the pivot for me. I think the most monumental one. And it was scary. I remember my first couple of closings that I was like, like I had to like sort of fake it till I make it. I'm like, oh yeah, it happens this way all the time. And she's like, no, it never happens that way. I'm like, oh, okay. I think back on that closing sometimes, and I laugh so much. But I learned from that closing, and I still learn from every other one of my colleagues and one of my, and Tommy and I are very big complimenters. Like we won't just give compliments, but like if I see a great contract or I see an attorney who had thoughtful changes, I will say, I wanted to tell you, like, you did a great job. My job is very, very transactional. Real estate is very, very transactional. And I wanted it for that reason because it fits into my purpose of life right now. But every so often you'll see somebody who just does it a little bit better or also does it really shitty. But, we don't talk about those people, but those people deserve to be told that. And so it's ever growing, it's ever changing, because it's so transactional, there is very little that I have not seen, but every so often there's something, a version of it that I haven't, that's different. And that person deserves to be commended. And then I will interpret it in my way and in my firm on my own.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so now it's time for our rapid round, and it's called the Breakthrough Blitz. Are you ready to help us break through, Amanda?
Ready.
All right. So what's your favorite productivity tool or app?
Productivity tool. I listen to Audible. That makes me productive in the sense where it opens up my mind to give me more business ideas and strategies. Does that count?
Yes, it sure does. So what's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
I play a lot of tennis. Tennis.
Very good.
Yeah.
So if you could have dinner with any female business leader, living or deceased, who would it be?
Ooh. Female. Since I was a kid, I've always had a fascination with Jackie Kennedy. So I read a lot on her, and I did like that she was a trailblazer for, whether it was just like the art in the White House or like her style. Nonetheless, it was still trailblazing. So I'd say Jackie.
Very good. So what's your favorite quote or mantra that keeps you motivated?
Very much in line with integrity. My 8th grade quote was this, and it's now my quote today. No one makes you feel inferior without your consent, by Eleanor Roosevelt.
Thank you for sharing that. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to aspiring female entrepreneurs?
Use the fear as your drive to succeed.
Thank you.
Don't let anybody stop you. Just keep going and trust what's inside of you. It'll guide you.
All right, here's my last Breakthrough Blitz question. What's the biggest misconception people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
Probably that they're balancing too much and that their finger's not on the pulse, because usually they are the default parent. So they're usually balancing, for the most part, both. So I think that's the misconception, and I think it's not accurate.
I'll tell you what, this has been a great discussion. So Amanda Barron-Frank, how do listeners and watchers get in touch with you?
Sure. So the firm is the Frank Law Firm, PC. Our website's www.frankfirmpc.com, and my email is amanda@frankfirmpc.com. Love to speak with any of you.
Amanda Barron-Frank, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the
Thank
very
you.
best.
Very nice to meet you and speak with you, Jim.
Thanks for tuning into the Cherish and Conquer podcast from Marina. Join our community of trailblazing women at community.marina.ai and get access to exclusive resources, checklists, and guides. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it across your social platforms. See you soon, and remember, barriers are for breaking.